8 years ago, he realized he had special skills. He was 10 years old at the time and at home, playing with your power, making objects float. When your mother came in, instead of praising it, she screamed at him, stopping whatever he was doing. After that, spoke calmly, asking if he still wanted to live with her for a long time. And Turan said yes, how he wanted to stay with her. She asked me to promise not to use that power anymore, from that moment. Also asked him not to use power, in front of other people, and Turan asked why he was being stuck. She asked if he remembered the story about the nobleman, and he said yes. Basically, people with special powers, as they are called magicians. Whether nobles or however, there is a difference between them. Nobles are descendants of divine beings. Lords too, who descended to save ancient humans. So are descendants of these nobles. But with blood mixed with humans. What creates this difference even between wizards? She then explains that he cannot use his powers, because he inherited his father's abilities, who is it? Says there are many evil nobles outside the city, who treats like slaves. So, he must keep secret the fact that he is a magician. 8 years later, Duran still kept that promise. And has no desire to reveal his powers. Actually, he doesn't even intend to go down from the mountain to the village. In the village, 2 ordinary children play magician and monster, until the popular grandfather, Lebes, appears. The boy asks, what you need to do to become a magician. And Lebes replies that it is not something you achieve, just wanting. Lebes explains that magicians are the pinnacle of humanity. Those who rule humans from a higher plane are basically nobles and who hidden powers of your Pakistani. What does it mean those kids cannot become magicians? One of the residents is surprised by his frankness. At this time, someone comments that they heard talk about a monster that appeared. Labhas confirms, saying a local called a Rob found the child the night before. She is described as covered in a black shadow and with leopard shape, but the size of a house. Even so, Labhas says not to worry, for the chief of the village has already gone to the city and asked a magician for help. Everyone is relieved, and one of the residents warns children not to enter the forest for security. Kill a monster. Being an ordinary person is practically impossible. That's why they need a magician. The resident asks if everyone knows this, and she seeks a firm. He then asks if Turan, the shepherd of the hill, you also know. In Quantumissa, Turan is lying on the hill, resting with his sheep as a pillow. He looks up at the sky and complains about how everything is always the same and boring. Sighing, says he will forget how to speak if they continue like this. At this time, Lettuce appears and claims he's sleeping, even before sunset. Turan completely ignores and sends him out of the front. Because it's blocking the sun, Lebes is outraged by the lack of education and asks if he still holds a grudge against the past. It is the moment when wanted to turn the sheep into property shared after the death of Turan's mother. No detour Turandus that still keeps yes. He claims it is not probably about to share his mother's inheritance and makes it clear that they are not close enough for conversations. Fran Lee, send the old man out soon. What he wants to leave. The cold answer makes Labus angry, but the expression of Tura is contained. Labus finally explains the reason for the visit, the monster that appeared. He describes the danger, but Turan doesn't seem impressed. Labus is surprised by his calmness, even though it is a possible target. Labus says the village chief has already gone to get a magician, and asks Turan, take care. Turan rebate, saying he's not worried about him, but with the sheep. It irritates Labus, who ends up leaving after hearing Vitoran send him out, and still insult your bad breath. Monsters are creatures with powers and magic, as well as mages towards humans. Nagat gets excited over the idea of finally see a magician in person, although I doubt it's someone very special, as it is a rural village. Yet he wants to see how strong a magician can be. Shortly after, he smells blood and starts to follow the trail. Soon finds the body of Labia completely torn. Turan realizes that the old man has come to visit him. He just wanted to let you know, but ended up being the first victim. He keeps the cold expression when analyzing the situation, and concludes that it was not an ordinary animal, but a monster. Before I finish thinking, the creature arises from the forest. It matches the huge description, with dark aura and fierce appearance. Monsters are so strong that humans, common, fail to face them. Rob's son hears this and thinks the village is lost. But your father says the magician will handle it. Off. Wizards can defeat monsters with a single word. Before the monster, Turan shows no fear. Calmly orders him to die. An impact wave hits the creature, throwing backwards, but she holds on. Turan is surprised that his attack doesn't work. While thinking of another strategy, the monster advances. He orders you to stop, but the creature almost hits him, realizing that your orders were not effective, taking the fight seriously. He takes a sling, puts a stone, and use magic to harden it before throwing it. While the stone flies, he uses another order to accelerate even more. When approaching the monster, he orders you to drill generating enormous force, with shock waves running through the creature's body. Even so, not enough to kill her. The monster advances, without realizing that the stone is already returning, like a boomerang. With absurd force, she goes through the monster's head from behind, before he hits Turin. The creature falls dead to the ground. Shark stays calm all the time, then decides to throw the body in the valley, thinking about how the locals only cause you problems. The next morning, he receives the unexpected visit of several residents. Furious, they knock on the door, demanding him leave, and they're there to accuse you of killing Lebes. One of the men grabs him by the collar, calling it shameless and saying it hurt Lebes and left him to be devoured by monsters. Ta calmly responds that he understands why they want to blame him, since the eldest of the village died alone, while the young men were afraid to face the monster. He says they're placing blame on him for being the easiest way, and it infuriates the man who tries. Sokolo Mortaran deflects easily and counterattacks with a headbutt, making the man's nose bleed intensely. At the bottom, Turan is pleased with the magic, because it makes everything more convenient. It happens because if he wants something, it happens at the cost of mana. One of the attackers runs towards Turan, trying to hit it with a piece of wood, but Turan whispers Slay, ordering him to fall. Your wish comes true and man stumbles. Before reaching that, Turan keeps playing with the others, since you don't even have to make much effort to defeat them. He just intends to deal with them enough not to kill them. Then Turan picks up the piece of wood from one of them and hit his face, while using it as a shield against the attacks of others. In the end, Turan defeats everyone easily, still hiding the fact that he was a magician. After beating them, he rebukes them, saying they should have used your same strength to organize the funeral labors. After defeating the men, Naga asks the women who were with him if they also came to fight, but they just raise their hands, saying they don't want trouble and who only came to greet him. Naga doesn't care, for they don't have the courage to fight like men, and sends the wounded back to the mountain. When you come home, he knows it won't end there, because they will still try to harm you. When he goes to the village, Nagoshi, even so, he doesn't care, because you can simply hit them until you get a fair deal. Da adds that no troublemaker will bother you again, since he already gave a good beating to everyone. He barely finishes thinking that, when you hear someone slam the door and open it with asking who it is. To your surprise, the man on the other side doesn't appear to be one of the villagers. Nagat asks who he is, and the man replies that he just wanted to ask a favor during your trip, but seems to have arrived at a bad time. Nagat apologizes for the rudeness, saying he had unwanted visits earlier. At the bottom, Nagat doesn't even know if he answered correctly, since he doesn't usually talk to locals, although his mother always taught him good manners. Trying to improve the situation, he tells the stranger he can come in if you are looking for accommodation. Shortly after, Turan prepares a meal worthy of a feast for him. While eating, and Turan explains that he doesn't talk to the residents because he was born and grew up on the hill. He lived his whole life as a shepherd, and comments that a small village is strange, receive tourists. Supreme Dentiment, the man praises, saying he has good manners for someone who grew up alone. Toph reveals that he learned from his mother, that says she has already passed away due to an illness. The man makes a gesture, religious, and claims she is in heaven, for you created a good son. After that, the conversation follows again. Uran asks what brought him to that village. Man says he has a contract. Someone asked him to look after a monster in the village, thus revealing that he is a magician. Nagat is surprised to hear this, and understands that he is the magician that Labus mentioned. The magician then says he has a question, and Nagat allows him to do. Omaka explains that you can feel the presence of a monster, but can't see it, and find it strange that Turan is so calm, even knowing the situation. He says Turan will be an ideal target for the monster, but shows no fear. The magician comments that he looked very brave to a shepherd who never left the village. With a serious expression, ask who he is. The magician drops the direct question, questioning if Duran is a magician, which immediately puts you on alert. Imam flashback, Duran had asked his mother what would happen if find out he's a magician. She explained that there are still bad nobles, and compared the situation to pastors. She said nobles are like shepherds and are like dogs they raised. They can treat you with affection like family, but they can also sacrifice it when necessary. His mother said she didn't want that fate for him, and reinforced that no one can know that he is a magician, and especially other magicians. Explains that if they discover, will take you, and turn you into a shepherd dog, disposable at any time. To avoid this, he might even need to kill people. Not present, Turan is already beginning to consider this possibility. The magician notices Turan's cold expression, and asks why he doesn't answer. Before Turan takes any action, the magician discards attention, saying it was just a joke, but that his reaction ended the fun. Durance calms, still surprised, and apologize, saying you don't have a great sense of humor. The magician says he's the one who should apologize for leaving it. Puzzled, Turan smiles and comments which was the first time you heard a joke from a magician, so he ran out of reaction. The magician remembers, who have not yet introduced themselves and say his name is Korn, a traveler. They shake hands and Turan also presents himself. He says he will be that year. And Korn comments that he is 75. Turan is surprised, since Korn doesn't look that age. Korn explains that magicians age slower, what ordinary people, and also live longer. Nugget asks how he became a traveler. Korn tells that after serving the family for 60 years, decided to leave and live traveling without settling in one place. Without realizing, Nugget ends up having a deep conversation with him, and is surprised for feeling so comfortable with the stranger. Realizing it's too late, Korn says he needs to leave. He leaves and silver coin on table saying that it is one of the purest and which covers the cost of the meal. Duran accepts with gratitude and wishes luck in the hunt. Korn tells him not to act like it's goodbye, as you can come back other times to enjoy hospitality. The next morning, Duran goes to the field to gather his sheep, looking more excited than ever. It makes sense since it was the first time he met a magician and had a nice conversation. Duran admits Korn has more sense of humor than any adult you've ever met. The night before, Korn came back with a hunt, and Turan concluded that he is a good person. For Turan, were always like hunting dogs without emotion, used by nobles. He gets confused about how to tell Korn that there are no more monsters on the hill. That night, Korn investigates the forest and finds battle signs, but don't feel the presence of any monsters. He sees a stone trapped in a tree and several felled trees, which makes him suspect that the monster has already been defeated. At the same time, be curious who killed him. What if the village chief called another magician besides him? Yet, consider it a relief, as it means the area is safe. Suddenly, he feels something strange, and when he turns around, see the leopard monster that Turan defeated, coming your way. The situation gets complicated, for the monster has turned into a Connie Spectre. Becomes desperate because I didn't expect something like that. While trying to understand what happened, the monster attacks, forcing to retreat. The monster turns into a specter when it is defeated, but your mana is neither absorbed nor dissipated. This is common knowledge among magicians, and Connie believes everyone should know this. The monster advances again. Korn jumps to the detour and confirms that who defeated was a magician. However, he doesn't understand why Lee Abai turns into a spectrum. He thinks he might have been the beginner, but at the same time he finds it unlikely since a rookie couldn't defeat a monster so strong. Without fully understanding why, Korn concludes that he needs to destroy the spectrum. Korn conjures up a horrible arrow and shoots it at the monster, but to your surprise the attack is cancelled. He is shocked, because it means that the monster's mana is stronger than his. Before you realize, the creature disappears before your eyes. Panicking, not knowing what she intends to do. Suddenly, the dirty monster behind him and strikes a mighty blow. Meat can deviate by little, but it's still Berlin. Then realizes you're dealing with a monster that not even an ordinary could face. By your analysis, only a lower level noble would stand a chance. Sweat runs down your fearful face, because finding such a monster in a remote village was the last thing I expected. Seeing the danger, Korn concludes that it is finished, but decide you won't die alone and intends to take the monster with him. He concentrates all his mana in his hand, planning to drill it the moment you. In that instant the monster does exactly that, and Korn also jumps towards you, ready to sacrifice. But before impact, a mighty burst of magic dirty the distance and cross the monster, defeating with the only blow. Relief appears on Korn's face. Then he hears a familiar voice behind him, asking if he's okay. Korn becomes shocked, without believing that Turan is a magician. Turan confirms and Korn asks why he didn't tell. Turan remains in orbit, so Korn reformulates the question, wanting to know why he took it, since I could have just left. Nugget decides to explain, and remembers the night before, when the Kawan returned with the animal he had hunted. Nugget asked why he acted like a hero, being able to make a lot of money from your skills. Kawa responded that the residents are worthy of pity for living on the border, no basic protection. Turan said it wasn't his fault. But Kawarn explained that, like the magician who inherited the power of a god, believes that your duty is to protect the weakest. He admits that not all magicians think like that, because each one has its own way of living in the present. Turan repeats that everyone lives their own way, like Korn said. Suddenly the monster attacks again, but both manage to deflect in time. Korn then says they can't handle it, because it's a monster that can only be faced by someone on the level of a noble, or send Korn to warn the village chief to evacuate everyone. As he tries to hold the monster at the bottom, the Kawan knows he has no chance against the creature, but still need to fulfill its role. At this time, the Nugget tells him not to worry, because his last attack had hit completely. There was no way he could worry. Korn is shocked when realizing that Turan is implying that he didn't even use all his strength, and that makes it even more impressive, for Turan is on a level comparable to that of a nobleman, or even higher. Korn watches, while Turan begins to absorb human around, preparing a devastating attack. At this time, realize you're in front of someone able to change the world. At the same time, Turan decides to use all his power. Curious about your own limits. With mana overflowing around you, he gathers several stones to use as projects against the spectrum. Meat says he won't let it fight alone, because no matter how talented it may be, the spectre is an extremely dangerous enemy. He believes they should fight together, but changes his mind when he sees Turan's first attack and realizes how destructive he is. Meat understands that it would only get in the way, and what best you can do is to allow the talent of Turan blooms. Turan's attack generates an enormous force. But when the dust settles, the spectrum is still alive. Turan is surprised, and Korn explains that it is not possible to kill a spectre with physical attacks. Nagat asks how she should defeat him, and Korn replies that only fire or electricity were. Tura tries to burn it, but failure, and Korn tells him he must be doing it wrong. Korn can't believe Nagat doesn't know something so basic, because applying magic to a living being requires a correct process. Then he begins to realize that maybe Turan was the one who killed the monster and let it turn spectrum. As the spectrum continues to attack, Korn understands something important. Turan never absorbed mana in life. He then advises Turan not to simply create fire, but form it correctly, and then release it. Turan follows the instructions and begins to create a flame in the palm of the hand. Creating fire is common for magicians, more controls what demands. Yet, Korn is in shock when watching Turan form a fireball with ease. Turan then throws fire against the spectre, increasing its intensity as it hits the target. The spectre screams in pain, and Korn sends to continue increasing human, not to let the fire go out, until everything is completely destroyed. Toph keeps the intensity still with calm expression, until the spectrum is reduced to a skeleton. Carbonized. Korn is impressed, because they defeated the enemy who would demand it. Noble Nagat asks if it's over, and Meat tells him to absorb human, if you don't want to face another spectrum soon. Nagat asks how to do this, and Meat explains that he must imagine that he is draining something inside. Turan does this, extends your hand, and human starts to come out of the monster's body, being completely absorbed into it. Hiron says he must feel some kind of pleasure, and Turan admits he didn't believe this before. A woman asks if this is really the first time he has absorbed. They were at home confirm it. Usually after a human grows slowly with age, and the best way to evolve is human absorbing from monsters or other monkeys. The most important is that this was Turan's first time. This is impressive, yet he already masters magic at such a high level. It makes Kaon realize that his potential is on another level. Suddenly, Korn calls Turan by name, apologizes for your rudeness, and asks which family he belongs to. Turan just tells him to look after the injured arm first, and what a surprise Korn. They return to Turan's house, and after cleaning and bandaging the arm, Dawn apologizes for causing concern. Turan remembers I already said several times that belongs to no important family, for he is just a shepherd who does not even know who his father is. Cain then asks why someone so powerful, I would live like a shepherd. He then says he doesn't want to, belittles that, but that it doesn't match him. Churro explains that it was a request from his mother. She says the nobles use mages, and then discard them. When listening to this, Cain claims that his mother was wise. During and surprises, because I expected him to say she was super protective, but Korn reinforces that she was right. He explains that magicians have great power, and that was inevitably already conflicts. Account that years ago, there was a great war between these nobles. The houses involved Waria that he served, and at Home's era, many people died in this war. Of about 3,000 Zofa, more than 900 died. Unfortunately, everyone near Korn was among the bikes. Among them were his wife and son. Carl reveals he was the only one who survived, which shows that his life can disappear easily, even more than that of a commoner. Yet, he says Turan's mother was wrong at one point. His repetition, Nagat gets confused, and Horn explains that he himself is just tough skill. Ian, already Nagat was able to defeat a monster that he didn't get. Horn claims that Nagat potential is at the level of a noble, not a mere. Actually, he informs that his aptitude is of a higher level during, or say the Horn, that his mother told him that his father is a but. By this time he already thinks this is a lie. However, a Horn explains that there are worse children than it, born among nobles, just as there are amazing children at noble level and born amongst. Horn then tells Turan he'd better leave. Still, and when the Turan asks why, he replies that humans need more nobles, and apparently humans are not yet the dominant predators, because other races that were driven out by the gods are still waiting for a chance to resurface. In the midst of this possible destruction, the nobles keep fighting wars among themselves, desaturating meat. This is exactly why they still need nobles, strong and kind. Like him, Horn ends up walking to the door, and asks Turan if he's involved, living like a shepherd. Turan thinks for a moment, and asks Korn what he could gain down the mountain, and Korn replies that it all depends on what he wants. Korn mentions that everything, from fame to family. It's hard to guess, but it takes over his imagination. As Korn leaves the house, he tells Turan he could become a wanderer. like him killing monsters that threatened people, or become an explorer who ventures into the unknown. He too could even be replaced by a house, and follow the path of power. Turan follows Korn and says he is right, because it would be interesting to really know the world instead of just taking care of sheep on the hill. Turan admits that for the first time, is curious about the outside world. On the other hand, Meat says he may already be creating expectations, unwanted, but guarantees that he will support you with everything he can. At this time, Flesh asks about his lineage ability, but Turano has no idea what that means. Korn apologizes for throwing this at him, because it agreed completely he knows nothing about magic. Korn then reveals that a lineage skill is a characteristic that nobles from their Hekistani, the Lord's prey. He says he owns a bloodline, is what differentiates a from a nobleman. A horn then asked if there was any spell that looked like strangely easy to use, or if he has any exceptional ability that does not require the use of magic. Toph reveals that he has a good sense of smell and is also quite good at throwing stones. Toy says his sense of smell can be considered a lineage skill, and the use of throwing weapons. It is also a feature of the house. He explains that it is something common, but asks Turan to tell you more. After revealing all your skills, Turan realizes that Korn's inspiration has changed. Turan asks why, and Korn reveals that she has finally found out which house. Turan approaches, and Turan asks what it is. With cold voice, he replies that it is one of the great houses, Akasa Particles, the same one who fought a war against the Arabian house. The moment Turan hears this, he understands immediately the change in the expression of Korn. Turan can't believe he comes from the same house that Korn hates so much, and it makes you wonder what I could say at that moment. He thinks about apologizing, but realizes that everything that happened was a result of the actions of family members he never knew, but are practically weird. Korn notices the magic expression on his face. Touch your man says not to worry about it, since he did not participate in the war. At the same time, Turan tries to say something, but Korn explains that this is an adult matter. He says if they try to wash blood with blood, we'll keep fighting forever. Turan then asks the Meat if he doesn't regret telling him. Go down the hill. Meat admits that they seek to descend in search of power, will inevitably end up joining the Zera family, but ensures you trust his character. Turan doesn't quite understand what he means, and Flesh explains that you're talking about his goodness that led him to save him from the monster. In addition, Turan revealed the identity he hid his whole life. Meat says there is a possibility that, if someone like Turan achieves power within the Zera family, he can stop a terrible war from happening again. He then turns to go away, saying that no need to think about it too much, since Turan hasn't even decided if he's going to join the family. Zara Turan prevents, saying now your thoughts are clear, because he wants to go down the mountain. Kaunan praises, saying he made the right decision, but Turan says he won't right away, and warns that it will only go after Kaun's wound is cured. Kaun then gets surprised to hear that, and admits Turan is a good person. Later, Korn introduces himself to explain the basics to Turan, saying that for his magic to be used he needs mana. That's why she's called the key to omnipotence. He says it's not really an omnipotent power, as the name suggests, but explains that to use magic it is necessary to have mana compatible with her. Tura then asks what is the default of this compatibility, and Cauldron informs that the difficulty of magic is determined mainly by three factors. The first is the lineage, the second is, and the third is causality. The first, the lineage, is determined by the blood he was born with. This implies the majority of nobles, who are knots. He gives an example, saying it would be hard for Turan heal wounds with magic, because he does not belong to the Revest lineage of the south, who can do this even without training. While the second factor, the Meat, says it's basically familiarity. This means that the magician can perform with more ease tasks you prefer, or those you are used to. An example of this is how he created a fireball, as if throwing a stone. And Turan confirms, saying that if he had tried to create flames in another way, maybe it didn't have the same speed or power. The last factor is causality, but he admits he doesn't completely understand her. Meat asks Turan what he thinks would happen if he tried to kill him directly using human, and Turan replies that some light would come out of his head, and it would be Badon explains that this happens due to lack of causality. He puts his hand over a glass on the table, making the content bubble. He explains that this occurs when there is no adequate cause for the result desired, or when the goal is excessively difficult. Nugget then replies that he understood, because if he wanted to kill Khan, it would be enough to create a plausible cause, how to create and launch flames, instead of spending mana directly wishing his death. Turan does this by lighting fire in the body, saying it would be more practical to kill the horn this way, since creating and throwing fire is more natural than simply cause death directly. Meat is impressed by Turan's explanation, and says he could have become a teacher instead of a magician. Turan says the Meat, who can control animals however he wants, but wants to know why wild beasts need causality. Kaun explains that this is related to their mana, and the two continue a long and boring conversation about how magic works. No final. Kaun says the bloodline Tsura also has a special magic, involving the ability of stealth and tracking. He suggests Turin try it, and he agrees. Turin wishes not to be seen, and to Korn's surprise, it cheaps. Turin becomes visible again, and a worried dog says he hasn't seen that in a while, admitting it's a scary skill. He explains that this was the rare skill that's most feared during the war. However, the flesh says holding that she is not invincible, although it looks very powerful. And meat says it will teach you more effective training method. Doing the Turin if he isn't teaching too much for someone in an enemy family. Carlos replies that Turin healed him and saved him, in addition to reinforcing that he trusts his character. Later, Turin goes down to the village to warn him that he intends to sell the sheep and go. He had already fixed his things, and the village chief gets desperate, asking why he made this decision, without consulting the just say to hire another pastor. Because you don't think it's the business. Nobody's what he does with his belongings. However, he says to buy the sheep for a fair price, because otherwise, he will just let them go. Nugget claims they can try capture them after that, but believes that will have difficulty. The village chief gets angry, but you know that Nugget forgets what he says, and it is not worth provoking him. The village chief has no choice, other than taking the sheep and paying for them, telling him to do whatever he wants. After that, Korn and Turin pay him more. Turin suddenly remembers that the villager still must compensation to Korn, and Korn informs that he has no intention of charging the fee, since it was Turin who defeated the beast. Right after, he comes to a fork in the road, and Korn tells Turin that this is where they split up. He apologizes for refusing the invitation to travel together because you feel more comfortable alone. Turin ensures that everything is fine, but thanks for everything. So the two say goodbye, and Turin says he hopes to find him again with a smile on my face. While the column disappears in the distance, Turin finally realizes the deep desire he always had for a father figure. Turin then continues its journey, and crossing the desert, sees a group of strange people in the distance, which makes you think maybe they are traders, traveling from village to village. Turin decides to approach to ask for directions. The group initially thinks Turin is trying to challenge them, but he explains that he is traveling alone, and need directions to the nearest town. The man with the eye patch then tell him to take the road to where they came, revealing that he will arrive in a city called Murray, waiting to get out of the way, thanking the group for their information. However, when you're about to leave, the man prevents him, saying he can't receive the information for free, because you need something in return. Before you realize, the group were fence, all armed. It is at this moment that he understands that he is dealing with bandits, and the man with the slap says he's in a desert, where no one would find it strange if someone died. He sends Turin to take his belongings, while still being kind, because killing them would only be more work. Turin then surprises the bandits by saying that since they are criminals who kill people, he can help them train, and smile. Evil in your face is enough to cause I shudder at them. Even so, the bandits approach thinking he's bluffing, but with a simple hand movement, Turin controls the wind and throws them away. Turin is surprised when he realized that he managed to create such a strong wind, with almost no mana. Bandits moan on the ground, not understanding what happened, and Turin takes his canteen by hydrating canteen water and mole in the form of stickers, using them to the body of one of the bandits. Shark doesn't feel fully involved, because he believes that throwing stones is much stronger and faster. At this time, the leader of the bandits realizes they are lost and starts begging for forgiveness. He guarantees that they will give anything to Turin, but as long as you beg. The others try to attack you from behind. The moment they are about to reach you, Turin hits its foot on the ground and creates thorns in the sand that go through all of them, leaving the leader in shock. Nugget then says he has a question, and the man guarantees that he will respond. Nugget asks why they attacked without a plan, since could he be a magician? The leader replies that Nugget has bowed his head, even when they spoke rudely to him. In addition, he also bowed as he greeted them, so they assumed he was just an ordinary person. Nugget thanks the leader, saying that what he told him taught him something important. The leader still asks if Nugget will save his life, but when looking up, realizes that death is coming. Before Nugget and Khan leave the mountain, Khan had said never to show mercy to bandits, for they never hesitate to hurt others. Nugget understands that he cannot save bandits, because a life spared by pity could end up harming 10 innocent people. He then prepares to leave, following the same path as where the bandits came from. However, as it advances, Shark can't help it realize you just killed people, even feeling a certain guilt. He knows he couldn't spare them, as Karn warned him clearly. After crossing the desert and crossing repeatedly about the teachings from Karn, everything finally comes to the new world. From above he can see the small town of Mirai, and when entering it he is impressed by the crowd, because it's the first time you see so many people in one place. Turin is even more surprised by noting that even the architecture is totally different from the village. For him, it's the first time who really feels like he's arrived in a city. Turin approaches a man who sells fruit and greets. Man thinks he wants to buy something, but Turin says he's not a customer. He remembers the words of Flesh, saying to look for a facility upon arriving in the city. Turan asks that the man show you the way to a facility. But the seller ignores him and tells him to leave, since you won't buy anything. Turan gets confused by rudeness and wonders if it's a rule, to buy something before asking questions. Then he points to an apple and asks the price. The seller says it costs 2 pizzas. And when the bull shows 2 coins, and the seller realizes immediately that he is an outsider, yet he says he can pay with other currencies too. Before paying, Turan asks where he can find an installation, and the man says to go straight down the road, behind the cover shop, and then turn left. He explains it's the building with the blue roof, the largest facility in town. After following the instructions, Turan arrived at the facility and is greeted by Lena. He asks the price of one night, and she replies it costs 16 the pix. Turan agrees to pay, but says he has another doubt. He asks if there are any monsters nearby, as a reward. Lena gets confused at first. Turan explains that you need to kill monsters and absorb your mana. In addition, hunting monsters also gives money. Second or corn. Nugget realizes that Helena does not respond. Asks why. She says nothing in the world is free, and after being satisfied, send him there to the city hall. But Nugget doesn't know what that is. Leia explains where they are treated, public affairs, and where the city senator's officers were. However, she warns that probably is already closed because it is late, but advises him to go to the next day, because there you can find rewards for monsters. Lena then asks if he is a monster hunter, but Turan doesn't know what it means. Lena explains that there is a saying that if an ordinary person hunting monsters, she becomes a magician and takes on Turan who is trying to become a. At this time, a strange man named Midden, who is a monster hunter, appears behind Tura, saying this is true, for he saw with his own eyes. It seems that Lena and Midden already know each other, and she is surprised to see him alive. Midden to Max, saying I already said, who won't die until he becomes a magician. Luna is curious and asks him to explain better. Midden says how wizards get stronger when killing monsters. The same principle applies to ordinary people. They can become magicians. He reveals that he and his group are hunting monsters with this goal. Animated Turan asks if any of them have ever been magicians, but Midden replies that he does not. He mentions that in the city, there is only the magician of the Lord and 3 other subordinates, as Turan said, hunting monsters. Midden criticizes, saying his equipment is too bad, and that he doesn't even have a gun. However, Turan says he is yes, and shows his sling. Midden is impressed with the worn state of the sling, as this shows that Turan uses a lot. Turan admits, saying she's good at throwing objects the size of an egg, quickly. Midden then says he can hunt monsters like foxes and rabbits with slings. Midden comments that the group wants to add one more sniper and asks if he is interested in hunting with them. As expected, Turan politely refuses, but thanks for the offer. Later that night, Turan goes to the room, thinking how chaotic the day was. He wonders what will happen in the future, since he never imagined he would actually leave the village. While playing with your magic, his senses indicate that there is someone close to him. Gets out of bed and demands to know who is on the other side, from outside the door. That because Hedorn had told him never let his guard down, even in an installation, since being in a city doesn't mean being safe. Turan prepares for a possible attack. As he approaches the door, to your surprise, who is on the other side is Helena, who asks questions like he's been sleeping. Lena says she's there to warm you up because he thought the room might be cold. Turan gets completely confused and asks what she means by that. Lena touches her own body, making clear what I meant, but Turan still doesn't understand the situation. Lena then says she's willing to do whatever he wants, for a small amount of money. They ask what would happen if you didn't. Nothing he wanted. Lena holds Turan by the shoulders and tells him not to lie, because you can see it just by looking at his face. Turan's expression immediately turns cold, for he remembers the meat notice. Not to get involved with installation, since many of them carry diseases. Although magicians are resistant to disease, the problem is that he can transmit them to a woman, if you don't be careful. Porn told Turan not to leave his wishes. Lead him to something he can regret. Turan ends up turning down Lena and she leaves angry. Begins to fall to asks Turan that living in cities is complicated, since he had a bad experience with a fruit seller, and now also with Lena. Turan goes back to bed, thinking about how everything is priced, even the smallest things. It makes you realize that cities can be cold. And Quanto Issa, one of Midden's companions, asks why he wanted to recruit Turan before, since he doesn't look like much. One of him even says that Turan has an mal, and would serve well as bait for monsters. Midden then says Turan remembers himself when he was younger. Apparently, he was worried about the kind of weapon they last. Can use it to hunt Midden. That Arquitran stays next to him, so you can at least live a little more. Your kids can't believe and how kind your boss is, and not that they know. Turan can hear everything in the room. He lets out a slight smile when he hears this, because you realize that the city, maybe it's not as cold as I thought. The next morning, Turan goes to the lounge, where you find a rude employee. He says he wants to hunt monsters, but the man's expression and charisma remind us of Duran. Then Khan said about the world not being kind to him. Turan asked Khan why the world wouldn't be kind, and Khan replied that there is no reason to be. He said to Turan that the only way to be treated with respect is to reveal who is a magician, because it makes ordinary people lower their heads. The employee then deliver a book and have him take a look before returning it. Tourist realizes that it is a crow monster, and the man encourages him to bring the body back. He says if you kill the monster and don't absorb the mana, it will become a specter. But Tura already knew that. The official also informs that the punishment for this, according to the law of the city, it's execution. Nugget then asks if don't hunt monsters, and the man replies that they don't have time for it. Basically, this job is to maintain order in the city, while hunting monsters outside. It's the task of people like Turan. Turan ignores rudeness and goes hunting, but the employee believes he won't survive for a long time. Turan returns with a poisonous crow, with a big hole in the chest, leaving employees completely shocked. They are even more surprised, seeing that he brought the body so quickly. They ask if he came alone, and he says yes. Instead of arguing hard, just ask for the reward. One of them runs to the counter to get the money, and when delivering, suggests that Turan rest, because you must be tired. Employees get confused, because Turan killed the monster so cleanly, that almost everything was preserved. At this time, the employee who assisted him before realizes that Turan is still there. He asks why, and Turan wants to know if there are any monsters worth hunting. Employees are shocked to hear this, because they don't believe he still has energy to contain you. 3 days later, Turan has already defeated 30 monsters. Elena serves you the best dish on the menu. Elena comments that he must have made a lot of money, but Turao explains that money is not his only goal. What he seeks is the mana of monsters, and thanks to those who have already hunted, he got stronger. Tourist realizes that his mana has increased a lot since Netcorn. However, he knows there's a limit to what he can evolve, absorbing the mana of weak monsters. Shortly after, Shark finishes all the food, and he even thinks someone ate with him, but they say he ate it all by himself. Nugget praises the cook, saying the food was delicious, and the cook accepts the compliment, saying it will get even better. Nugget is going to the room when from behind, by one of Midden's subordinates. That requires money. Later learned that he won quite recently. Group does not argue, slap the man in the face, surprising him and his friends. The friend tries to fight back with a punch, but Bull dodges easily and hits his face. The first advances with a bang, but Turan blocks the attack and knocks him down with a quick blow in the head. Lena then screams with the group, ordering them to stop fighting inside the inn. Later, Life appears at Turan's door, lowering my head to apologize for what happened and saying that he has already reprimanded the two responsible, making sure it won't happen again. What explains that the group is in financial difficulties and probably was jealous of the money Turan is earning. He tells the two to apologize and they obey each other. Turan asks if the situation is that bad, and Midden reveals that in 3 days, maybe they can't even pay for the accommodation. At this time, Turan delivers a bag of money to him, leaving Midden shocked, who asks why. Turan said it's a way to repay the kindness that Midden demonstrated or worry about him and want to take him along. Midden is surprised to hear this and asks how he knows, but Turan ignores the question. However, Turan remembers Midden nothing is free, and asks for some information in return. With a smile on my face, Midden guarantees he will tell everything he knows, because information is your specialty. The next day, Turan goes hunting, believing it might be the last time in that city, since Midden give you information about the next city. So it's time to go. The information was really helpful, and it looks like Midden is a good person too, though not as experienced as the Horn. It makes it curer and kinder. Suddenly, Turan smells strong, and run immediately in that direction, waiting. That is not what you imagine. During arrives at the place and realizes that the smell is blood. To make matters worse, he finds the man he fought the day before, with the bloody body. As if that wasn't enough, he turns, find Mida's body on the floor, not understanding what happened. At this time, one of the group members, still alive, manages to talk and says it was a rabbit monster. The Turan turns and sees the culprit facing, and suddenly the rabbit moves forward with impressive speed. Turan is almost magical, but manages to divert. Not last second, he takes his sling and throws a stone, but the rabbit dodges. That's where you will realizes that the monster is already used to defend against attacks. From a distance, the rabbit moves on again, but this time Turan turns invisible, leaving the monster confused. Before you realize, Were appears behind him and digs a dagger into his shield. Even so, the rabbit against attack throws Turan back. The monster wastes no time and advances again, forcing Turan to turn invisible again. Irritated, the monster starts to destroy everything around, cutting down trees like it's nothing. After losing strength, he lets out a loud scream and dies by bloodstone. With the dead monster, Turan absorbs his mana, and realizes the amount is different. Actually, bigger than the leopard monster that he found in the village. At this time, the last of the group expresses shock at the realize that Turan is a magician. Turan confirms, and the man asks why he hides his identity. The Naga ignores and asks if they have family members for whom can deliver belongings. The man answers sadly that he does not. This reminds me of the night before, when Midas spoke about the nearby big city, Alderaan. Apparently, Oren owns the library with thousands of books. But not everyone can enter. Only magicians. After joining the group, Turan decides to go to Orem and wishes you to measure and rest in peace. When moving away, when it finally reaches Orem, Nagad understands why Nuray. It was considered a small town. Orem is so big it could swallow Nuray and Trilobe. He is also surprised to see the number of people trying to get into town. Nugget wonders if the guards are worried. Looking for mates. But don't you think it's weird, since it is a big city? When you are about to enter, one of the guards prevents him, saying he can't enter, because I've never seen anyone in clothes as dirty as the Avmetagak. The guard suggests he go clean himself first. Later, Turan gains access to the city and goes to the huge library, being impressed by the size. Turan concludes that it was definitely built with magic. At the entrance, he is stopped by the guards, who say the library is restricted only to magicians. The shark replies that he is a magician, but it pisses off the guards, who believe he is going through it. One of them extends his hand towards a swarm, and suddenly feels something strange. Apparently, Oren had told Turan that magicians recognize each other when feeling someone else's mana. They can also know if someone is stronger than them. The man is nearly crushed by the pressure of Turan's mana, about to fall to the ground, causing a colleague to ask what happened. He makes sure he's okay, but deep down he realizes that Turan is no ordinary magician, being at least of noble or higher level. The man immediately gets up and presents himself as Kinyata of the house returns. He then says he will contact the house. Before Turan realized, something that seemed simple already took him to the Tis mansion, elevated to a large swimming pool, where flies begin to take you. When you start to feel uncomfortable, asks you to stop and asks if you can wash yourself. The nurses say they would be punished for not adequately caring for a guest. Important to avoid problems for them. Turan says they can do as they wish. When they end, the Tura wears the elegant clothes he received. The rocks are impressed by your appearance. They ask for forgiveness, but he says there's nothing to forgive. Even so, insists that he doesn't talk to them casually. And Turan can't believe it's happening. Later, Turan meets the rude young woman of the house, a red-haired girl named Azila. Sore question, which house is he from? And Turao replies that for personal reasons. It's hard to say. Azila is surprised, and deep down he is already beginning to think of a provocation. How the Nugget is hiding his identity, releases his mana, and tells him to do the same. Nugget obeys, while releases a golden aura. Nugget releases a blue aura. The presence of the two is so intense that everyone in the environment is forced to lower their heads. After the demo, Zilla praises Turan, and in a subtle way, suggests he marry her. As always, Turan's expression gets cold, making shock and confusion to the butler off. Asks her to stop saying unnecessary things. Azila tries to fix it by saying it was a joke, but then still tell him to think about it. After she left, Turan looks at his own fingers and realizes they are. He understands that the hither is comparable to his. Soon after he goes to the captain's office, where you meet the leader of the house, Ruji Veltas. After presentations, Rogue says he knows Turan wants to use the library, explains that there is no extraordinary ancient magic there. He also states that there is no method secret to growing mana, but Turan says it's not the problem, because he never looked for this. Rogue then says it won't stop him and reveals that there is no confidential information from the house in the library. As it is already late, Rogue asks Turan to come back the next day, and Turan thanks for the kindness. The next day, the guards welcome you with respect. After confirming your permission, Turan enters the library and is completely impressed by its grandeur. While watching the place, a boy appears beside you, welcoming you, and introducing yourself as librarian. He says he will explain the library rules. Inside, Tourist is surprised, because I didn't expect the librarian to be a child. The boy explains that the first rule is do not damage nothing because I would have to pay for it. The second rule is not to remove any books from the library. He also says he will watch while the Nugget is there, but Nugget asks him to keep a certain distance, not to make you uncomfortable while reading. Turan asks if he also reads the books, and the boy confirms, saying it can help you find anything. The librarian asks if he wants to, novel or story, but Turan says he wants to learn the basics about the world. Shortly after, the librarian brings several books, saying they are too old, and maybe they're not ideal. Then, brings others who should help better. Tor thanks, and is impressed with the quality of the books. When opening a page, he feels like he's walked into the studio. So amazing is the content. Lass quickly falls in love with reading, and goes on to repeat this routine every day. Thanks to this, he learns about the geography of the world, the different races, and the etiquette of magicians. He also learns how various items are manufactured and processed. The world that was previously unknown to him becomes clearer and more vivid. Days later, Roig calls Turan to his office, saying that heard that he is enjoying the library well. Roig explains that allowing the use of the library, besides treating him like a nobleman, it was also a gesture of goodwill, and then says he would like to receive something in return. Turan asks him to say what he needs. Roig explains that the monster appeared north of the city and has attacked travelers. Turan asks if he wants me to hunt him down, and Rug says fours have already been sent, but did not return. This time he wants someone of the noble level, but the house comes back, can only send 2 people. Shark is not bothered, because protecting people is the duty of magicians, but feel that something strange, or continuous road, saying the North Road, has been blocked for 10 days, being an important trade route. When seeing this, Doris realizes that the problem already existed before your arrival, and understand why you were allowed to use the library so easily. Shortly after, the group prepares to leave the castle, and Carrot is with them. She complains that her father was too cautious in sending Turin together. It also in Marvin Velta's group, a family member. As they follow through the forest, Marvin asks Turin if he has an interest in Asura, but he replies that he does not. Marvin says this is a relief. Moments later, they find a wrecked carriage. Work of monsters that are hunting. The soldiers begin to investigate, but Turin is the first to realize what happened. He says the monster is a monkey, and Zella wants to know how he came to that conclusion. Turin points to a handmark in the distance, and explains that the monkey attacked the carriage before returning to the forest. He says they can find him by following the trail, says it doesn't have that kind of magic. And neither does Marvin. Turin then said he will try to locate, but she is surprised to realize what lineage Turin belongs. He takes a piece of cloth from the carriage to track the monster. Turin feels where mana comes from, and points the direction they should take. Shortly after, I messed with a creek where the trail disappears. He said the monster probably washed himself in the water. But she is shocked knowing that a simple beast would do that, to avoid being tracked. Turin attempts to calm that, saying maybe he just did it by accident. Suddenly, Turin smells it again and screams, warning that the monster is after them. As she said, the creature appears from the back and has a frightening appearance. As if not just, the monkey starts throwing stones, and high speed, crossing this. But Turin manages to dodge. Supreme Dentiment, he realizes that Zala and Marvin wear tools as shields, instead of trying to dodge the attack. The shark is extremely disappointed and realizes that his mother, it wasn't wrong. The monster tries to run away, but orders this to pursue him. When they are about to lose it, a stone at very high speed goes through the head of it, crosses the formation of and hit the monster's body, pushing on the ground. Azula and Marvin were shocked, and it comes that it was Turin who took the stone with his sling. With the incapacitated monster, Azula uses her fireball magic, burning the creature with overwhelming power that almost heats up the whole environment. Turin, on the other hand, is impressed when finally see the lineage skill of your house. What is pyromancy? Azula admits she fell here when the stone passed by her, while Azula and Marvin argue. Woundeds cry out for help. Rebukes them, sending stop complaining to a man whose arm was completely torn off, and the group begins to provide Turambo first aid. Your turn is relieved that there are no deaths, but believes they could have prevented serious injuries. He assured that Marvin and Azula are stronger than, but they still used weaker people like. Marvin realizes the strange expression of Turno and asks what happened, but he says it's nothing. Azula then says he can absorb mana with them. Turan accepts, and the 3 surround the monster to absorb the mana. Apparently, Turan read a book that even when several people absorb mana at the same time, the gain does not decrease. Shortly after, Marvel she stopped, because they have already reached their limits. But to your surprise, Turan continues to absorb. Azula finally understand why your father asked him to accompany them, for the level of magic and the ability to mana of Turan rival hers. This is even more, because he is a nobleman who still nor reached its growth limit. Later, the group returns to the castle, and Warvia praises Turan, saying that it was thanks to him that they defeated the monster. However, Turan tries to be a nurse, saying it was nothing too much. Actually, he regrets not having realized the danger before, giving the monster a chance to attack first. In addition, he didn't expect the monster had detection ability. Others are surprised by this, and Turan explains that different skills arise, depending on the physical characteristics of the monster. He said the monkey had big hands and eyes, large, but it didn't look like its original shape. Akia believes he has developed the ability to launch objects with great strength, and to see in the distance or through the forest. Marvin is impressed with Turan's knowledge, and he explains that he studied a bestiary in the library. Marvin is surprised, because nobody usually goes to the library, since it considers it tedious. Azula admits it was once out of curiosity, but found the books difficult, and left without finishing any volume. Nagant then suggests that next time, they ask the librarian for easier books. Gat's confused, because I didn't know there was a librarian. Later, Nagant goes to the library, and the librarian welcomes with enthusiasm by standing before him. Nagant realizes that something is strange, as he doesn't exactly look like an ordinary librarian. Nagant asks how he knows his name. That surprises you because you realize you've been discovered. He explains that he saw it in Turan's entry pass, and who can see everything inside the library. Turan asks what should he call it, and he replies that he has no name, so it can be called as you like, without the specific name. Turan decides to call him just a librarian. With a more serious tone, Turan asks if he is from the ancient empire, and he replies that he is not even human. He reveals that he is a spirit and that he and the library are just a. He explains that in its current form, it's just a way to communicate based on the preference of the viewer. During the scar, saying that way has nothing to do with your preference. The librarian insists that it is a reflection of what Duran wants to see. Duran then tries to touch him and realizes that your hand crosses easily. The librarian says it's frustrating, unable to physically interact, because if you could, would have punished whoever took the books from the library. Duran realizes that no one else knows about his existence, and the librarian confirms that only those with a certain level they can see it. It means that Turan is the only one able to see it. Turan asks what that means, and the librarian replies that it is related to lineage. Turan asks for more explanations, but the librarian jokes, saying you should ask parents. Turan then reveals that he is an orphan, and the librarian decides to help you. He asks permission to examine his body, and Turan accepts, a little nervous. The librarian walks his hand through his body, and confers the pursuer and hunter lines. Sahar house features. Suddenly, he reveals that one more line is mixed. He explains that Turan is a result of two different lines. Turan asks what is the other, but the librarian says it's still blocked. He explains that this is not rare, and that the lineage will be unlocked naturally as he gets stronger. Duro finally confirms his suspicion. Your mother was too polite to be a commoner, so it probably had a noble origin. Turan thanks the librarian for his help, but he suggests he stay another month in the library. After that, Turan continues to attend the library, always accompanied by the librarian. He asks for explanations about the books, and the librarian teaches everything he wants to know. He knows knowledge lost thousands of years ago, and teaches Turan about the laws of nature, completely expanding your mind. Learn that diseases arise from microorganisms, and that the decomposition of living beings occurs by action of these organisms. He also understands principles such as agent of light, frictional heat generation, and healing processes. Later, he performs an experiment on decomposition and is impressed by the result. Thanks to all this, he improves a lot as a magician. He comments that maybe the big houses monopolize knowledge, because if everyone forgets that, could lose advantage. The librarian understands because people's knowledge has been decreasing over time. Before they realize, the month goes by and during that the time to leave. The librarian is surprised. Turan comments that Orud had already been signaling for him to leave. The librarian gets desperate and tries to go with him, but it goes through Turan's body. Turan asks if he can leave the library, but he says no. Still promises to take care of him if he stays, but Turan refuses. When leaving, he guarantees that he will come back to visit, for there are still many books that he has not read. With this, Turan packs his things and leaves town. He got the library map and discovers that the base from Zera House, the Unreal Desert, is east of Foreign. Tough guy decides it's time to go there, looking for clues about your parents. That night, he camps in the woods in no hurry, because he believes that the clues would not easily disappear. As you continue your journey, it also eliminates monsters along the way. The next day, he sees a horse protecting its owner, and unconscious of two black elves. Both get frustrated, because they are being prevented by a simple horse. To defeat it, elves use their power to raise dead monsters in the area. Nugget remains hidden while watching everything. Nugget is in doubt between helping or not, because he doesn't know if the man unconscious was the one who provoked the elves. Then, the elves decide to eat the humans they killed. When they see that they are cannibals, Rita immediately activates her stealth skill. Using stealth well, he throws a stone at one of the elves, instantly decapitating the other. Panicked, watching his friend lose his mind beside him, and quickly gathers the monsters he summoned. During interviews another attack, but the bull monster protect the elf with its strong head. The bull then advances in the direction where the attack came from, felling trees, but can't find Turan, or elf in despair, because you know the danger of someone with stealth, and use one of the monsters to find out where Turan is hidden. Turan is forced out of stealth, and the elf orders the monsters to attack him. Turan conjures up a fire attack, and eliminates one of the monsters, but before repositioning, the bull advances on him. He's almost replaced but can dodge by a little. Turan panics at the speed of the monsters, and thanks for eliminating one of the elves earlier. Suddenly, one of the monsters bites him from behind, taking his leg. While struggling to let go, the bull hits by throwing a tree. Turan hits the tree hard and screams in pain. He spits blood and falls on his knees, while the elf says he will make him suffer before killing that. Suddenly the horse kicks the elf in the face, joking. Or elf asks for help, and the monsters start attacking the horse, completely ignoring Turan. This turns out to be an error, as Turan seizes the opportunity and launches the mighty attack that rips off the elf's head. With the death of the elves, monsters also died and Turan falls on its knees. Blue, the horse approaches to check if he is okay, and Turan thanks for the help. Later that night, the horse owner wakes up and is surprised when seeing a stranger in front of you. Turan greets casually, and the man demands to know who he is. Turan explains that he heard being attacked by black elves, and so saved. The horse approaches and the man caresses revealing that his name is Tilly. Turan comments that he is a great horse because it protects its owner. The man thanks for being saved and presents himself as Rockberg Aces. Turan also presents itself and asks if there was any reason why the conflict with the Black Elves. Asis explains that he was in hot pursuit with his subordinates when attacked for no reason. He says he's always heard that other races were wild, but I didn't expect it to be so serious. Asis gets excited and apologizes for demonstrating your feelings, revealing that you lost important people. Toph asks if they were family. Aziz explains that they were and servants that is created from an early age. So they were like family to him. Turan concludes that Aziz is a good person and asks how many black elves attacked him. Since he killed 2, Aziz replies that everyone has already been killed. To ensure there are no more enemies, we use ear detection ability to check the area. Asaz asks if Turan has any urgent appointments, and Turan says he's also on his journey. Asis is surprised by this, considering Turan's strength, and asks if he's from any big house. He also wants to know why Turan is alone, and Turan replies that it is difficult to explain. Besides saying it's not that strong, he claims he won only by ambushed, and with the help of Linden. The two then release their classes to measure their strengths. When finishing, Turan is surprised by the amount of mana of Asis. He realizes Asis would probably have more mana than he if he hadn't absorbed the elf's mana. Aziz believes that Turan is of a noble lineage, powerful, and has not yet reached its limit. It makes you question why Turan is traveling alone. How the Turan does not have a fixed destination. Ace suggests he go with him to the Berg house. He guarantees he wants to repay for having saved his life, and escort him safely. Tough question how he intends to reward him. Ace then reveals that his family belongs to the Arab house, a large northern house specializing in enchantments. He says his bloodline creates timeless electronic tools and promises to do the best possible flexible item to last.